Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. It is the daily for Monday, December 5th. Ohio State is officially back alive in the national championship race. They are playing Georgia in the Peach Bowl on New Year's Eve. That's Bill Landis. And there's nobody I know who's more fired up about all the opportunities in front of the Buckeyes now than Zach Boren. So I said, man, you got to get on here. You got to get on the podcast. You got to break down your initial thoughts on this matchup. I know it's one that you really wanted, Zach.
I did really want this matchup. I think with the way this Ohio State season ended, Ohio State needed to make a statement. And what better way to play Georgia in Atlanta, in a place that Georgia will now play for the third time. They played week one against Oregon there. They obviously the SEC championships there. So to get basically Georgia in their backyard, which is about, I've went to Athens. So it's about, you fly into Atlanta, it's about an hour drive. So right in their backyard, and to be able to have the night game, which obviously they showed you from a TV rating standpoint, which game they thought was the bigger game, which is a Georgia-Ohio State game. So 8 p.m. New Year's Eve, what better way to make a statement against this Georgia team that everyone after this past Saturday thinks is unbeatable?
What was down there? An 80s bar in Athens or something that you liked?
90s bar.
Oh, 90s bar. Okay.
Oh, that sounds great.
90s bar. It's absolutely amazing.
Zach, Ryan Day on game day Saturday described this opportunity as a new lease on life for Ohio State, and I want to know your perspective as a player. I don't know maybe if you found yourself in a similar position before, but to go from where this team was, probably 5 days ago, coming off of the loss to Michigan, to now having this new lease on life, what does that do for a psyche of a team, and what do you think that could lead us to in terms of what we see from the Buckeyes?
Well, it's 100% a new lease on life. I was never around during the college football playoff. It came just after I left. But knowing their feeling after the Michigan game on, that Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and it trickled into last week, how they felt to now be able to get a new opportunity. To me, it just brings me back to almost 2014. And you saw how dangerous that team was in 2014. They got blown out by Virginia Tech. I think they were in the number 6 spot going into championship weekend, and then beat the brakes off Wisconsin 59-0 and got into the 4th spot. And then next, you saw what they did against Alabama and Oregon. And this is really the last time that Ohio State's kind of had this feeling. Every other time they've made the playoff, it's kind of been like, hey, we're winning the Big Ten. We're going in. We're supposed to be taking care of business. And it has always been that way. And so as a player, as a coach, you're like, man, we got our asses beat against Michigan, and now we've got an opportunity to go back and win a Final Four game against Georgia, and then go play in the national championship game and still get those opportunities. That makes this team a dangerous team, because now it's kind of like we're not going to hold anything back. We're going to put everything on the line. We've got nothing to lose. And Ohio State never really plays like that. We talk about it all the time, is that when they play against a Purdue, a Wisconsin, a Notre Dame, even Michigan this past year, people are like, man, Michigan's expected to lose. They're coming into the horseshoe. They took care of Ohio State last year, and Michigan plays like they've got nothing to lose. And so it's never really Ohio State that has that mindset. And I think going into this game, that's the mindset they're going to have, and it makes them a really dangerous team.
Yeah, that danger, Zach, and that opportunity that's in front of them is really quite rare for Ohio State, at least in my, 11, 12 seasons here of covering Ohio State. I think I'd have to double check. I think that Ohio State has only been an underdog and not won the game outright one time since I've covered Ohio State. And that was Alabama in the national championship game. And there were other factors that were at play there with banged up Justin Fields and Trey Sermon being hurt and COVID and all the other things. There just seems to be something about Ohio State when the shoe is on the other foot and they get to be the ones on the attack and to prove something wrong, and that nobody thinks they're going to win the game. That seems to just, I don't know. Ohio State seems to maximize that when they get those rare opportunities. And I don't know why that is, but it certainly seems to work.
Well, I think those opportunities are so rare because the only times it happens are in situations like this, when everyone thinks, Ohio State hasn't performed the way they ought to perform, or they didn't meet the standards that they're used to meeting. And then next thing you know, hey, their backs are up against the wall and they got to come out fighting. It doesn't happen often at Ohio State, but
Right.
when it does, they come out angry. And I think that's what we're going to see. You and I have been talking, there's so many questions with this team and what that team is going to look like come that matchup on New Year's Eve. It's, is Ryan Day going to be calling the plays, which I think he will, but there's been a lot of questions about that after things kind of getting sidetracked during the Michigan game. What's going to on defense? Are they going to keep on rotating, or hey, going against those big uglies at Georgia? I mean, I think everyone's seen them. They live and die by being physical up front and establishing the run. You got Stetson Bennett, who's a hell of a player, can use his legs. There's so many different things. I mean, I don't even think this should be a question, but I'm sure some people are going to ask is, you look at CJ Stroud, you look at Paris Johnson, you look at Ronnie Hickman, who are guys that are probably walking out. Are they going to play in this game? Some people have, I've already seen on social media, some people asking those questions. I don't think their questions are going to be asked, but it's, how much are those guys buying into finishing it off this season? It even goes back to, is JSN going to play? Is Jackson Smith and Jigba gonna come back after I think a grade 2 hamstring? No one really knows, but obviously he's got to be somewhat healthy by now. So is he going to get dialed up and play, or is he even worth it to him? So I mean, there's just so many different storylines that are going into this Final Four game, and it's intriguing because that's normally never the case when you cover an Ohio State football team.
I think CJ Stroud's going to play. Just throw it out there.
But there's some people out there who think otherwise.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's the unfortunate new reality of college football, I guess. Yeah. Do you see any similarities between Michigan and Georgia in terms of the way they operate?
I see similarities from the physicality standpoint. They're both built big up front on the offensive line. You look at both their offensive lines, they love to run the football and just be big and maul you. And so there's some similarities with that. But other than that, I don't know. The defense are kind of built a little bit different. Georgia's much more longer, athletic, speed-wise. Michigan's more, obviously, thicker, Buffy, the Big Ten normal defense. So, from a physicality standpoint, on the offensive line, I can see a similarity. Maybe in the quarterback position, J.J. McCarthy likes using his legs, getting on the run. But, I mean, I think Stetson Bennett runs circles around J.J. McCarthy. I think Stetson Bennett's the far superior player. So, there's not going to be many similarities, but Ohio State needs to strap on their pads and kind of go to work like they are playing a Michigan team, because in order to beat Georgia, you got to be able to hold on to the football. You got to be able to dominate or establish the run. On defense, you have to be able to stop the run. You got to get them in third and long situations. And so, I mean, you're going to have a little bit of the similar game plan. You're going to look for to do some of the same things. But from a team standpoint, personnel standpoint, I think they're drastically different.
Zach, deep down, which would you have rather had? Going right back into a rematch of the game in the semifinal in the desert, and then get your retribution, spend all month wanting that, and then knock Michigan out in the semifinal? Or is this path the one that you would choose, and potentially playing them with the title on the line?
So that's a great question, because you want to know why my mind has went back and forth more than my wife when she's trying to figure out where she wants to go to dinner. You guys know what that is. When you ask your wife where she wants to go to dinner, has no idea. Her mind goes all over the place. So, that's where my mind went. When everything happened Friday night with USC getting beat, my mind went directly to, God, I can't wait to play Georgia. We're going to get Georgia. We're going to beat them. And then I want a national championship, Ohio State, Michigan. I just want that matchup. And then as Saturday went along, you saw the TCU game. You saw the way Michigan played, obviously, Saturday night. And there's just a part of you, it's like, man, you just want another lick at Michigan. You thought TCU is probably the easier matchup, and you start thinking, well, if Michigan gets TCU, you ought to think they're going to win that game. And then, they're getting into the national championship, and you obviously want Ohio State. What happens if Ohio State gets beat by Georgia and you're watching the SEC championship game? You're like, man, Georgia looks really good. And so you just start going all over the place. But then Sunday comes around, and I'm like, man, I want that matchup with Georgia. I think that's what I want. You look at 2014, the harder matchup was obviously going against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. And what did Ohio State do. They went down and took care of business, and and they won that football game. So now as time has went on, I'm like, man, I want Georgia and I want to play Michigan in the national championship for all the marbles and just get that redemption, get that payback then.
How crazy. We can't skip past Ohio State, Georgia. That's going to be insane. This month is going to be crazy. But imagine what the next week will be like if it's Ohio State, Michigan for the title, and the whole podcast crew is out there in Los Angeles getting ready. I mean, my God.
Man, I don't know. You know what? Everyone. I know I used to complain when it was like Georgia, Alabama in the national championship game, right? I'm like, why does everyone want to see two SEC teams? What the hell? But now that I'm in this position, I'm like, well, hell, there would be a little bit of a draw with two Big Ten teams. But then you think about the biggest rivalry in all of sports, right? And you had 17.3 million viewers on the Saturday of Thanksgiving Day weekend at a noon game. What are you going to get at 8 p.m.? It's the only college football game on with Ohio State, Michigan. I mean, it might break all-time records for viewership. I mean, that game will be so massively big, and there will be so much at stake outside of just the national championship, which is so weird because you think playing for a national championship, everything's at stake. But then knowing the rivalry behind it, knowing they've never played twice in 1 year, knowing kind of what's transpired over the past couple of years, God, that would be fun. We'd have some cocktails enjoying that one, boys. I'll tell you that.
I'm certainly in favor of it if it gets to that point. We'll see what happens in the Peach Bowl. Bill, anything else on your mind?
No, I'm just I'm excited for the build up to a playoff game. I'm excited that we don't have to break down Ohio State, Michigan just yet. I was always in favor of it. That game was going to happen again, making a national championship. So I'm kind of glad that's where we are, and I'm really pumped to see Ohio State, Georgia.
Zach was kind of hoping that Ohio State was going to the Orange Bowl because he was already going to be in South Florida for New Year's.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Sorry, buddy. Playoff instead.
I would rather us be in the Final Four, but you're right. I would have been really upset if you would have told me that like last Monday or Tuesday. I'd been really, as the week went along and I started to get over my tears that I had from last weekend, I was starting to come to peace with, Ohio State, Tennessee, or Ohio State, Clemson, and in the Orange Bowl down in South Florida. But it's all right. I'll be watching I'm not going to go to the Final Four game, believe it or not. I normally always do, but I'm not going. I'll be in South Florida then. So if anyone's down in South Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, let me know. You can come over to the house New Year's Eve. We'll put on a party. We'll watch the game. So I'm banking on the Buckeyes taking care of business and then getting out to LA and seeing them in person out there.
Zach, we're building a pretty big audience for the podcast. I'm not sure you want to send that invitation out to the whole world, but I guess I have been to a Boren tailgate, so you're not afraid to party.
No, we're not afraid to party. We don't discriminate on the amount of people that we have at the house. So it's we'll have some fun. And we've been in Fort Lauderdale for a little while, for a number of years now, and I've never found an Ohio State bar down there. Never found anything. So but Buckeye people, man, reach out to the podcast if you're down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. You'll be down there watching the final.
All right, drop some comments for Zach or hit him up on Twitter, zboren44, or he'll be back for some Buckeye Qs. He's easy to find. He's out there. We'll have a lot more updates, and of course with Zach as the month goes on, as we get ready for Ohio State, Georgia, December 31st in the Peach Bowl. This has been the Podcast Daily. We're obviously excited about this next step. It's a new lease on life for everybody, and a new lease on coverage for this month ahead. It sure as hell beats the alternative of getting ready for a scrimmage in South Beach that nobody was in favor of.
Hey, you could have hung out the house, man.
Well,
we could have done the podcast
you're right. Other than that, the game itself, no thanks. But I did miss out on that opportunity. I'll just have to find some other way to make up for it later. For Zach and Bill, I am Austin. This has been the Podcast Daily. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later on.